I'm a black man trying not to get caught up. I'm just trying to solve the puzzle like a jigsaw. You know it's a big world, so easy to get lost. I'm just trying to solve the puzzle like a jigsaw.
What's going on, family, and welcome to another segment of The Living Room. I'm excited today to have a super interesting and dope conversation. Y'all know this podcast is extra black, and today we're going to talk about blackness and Christianity, a couple of things that are super important to me, and I think I got the perfect brother in the living room with me to talk about it, my boy Michael Wortham. Introduce yourself, man. Tell them who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, my name is Michael Wortham. I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York, by way of Atlanta, Georgia. Currently work as an educator, and but prior to that, served for 10 years as an assistant pastor, and licensed and ordained Baptist minister, and still your average, ordinary guy, black man in these streets.
That's what's up, man. He's the purveyor of hymns and hip hop, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hymns and hip hop was a good time. That was one of the things that myself, along with another my good friends and colleagues, Sandra Henderson, we put together and ran it while in Atlanta, Georgia. And who knows, it may find its way back into the world one day. We'll see how it go.
That's what's up. And that's actually an interesting segue directly to our conversation. A lot of us know that hip hop, especially in its origins, had deep roots in social justice, being an advocacy for communities, especially, black communities, right? So in what space does social justice now play in the world of Christianity and faith and the church?
And so to jump into that question,
yeah,
I guess the first thing I would say, it depends on what type of Christian you're talking about.
All right.
So, because even when we think about social justice, I think a lot of times our mind automatically goes to, like, we think of like the Martin Kings, we think of John Lewis's and others, and this kind of, this black center move, this black Christian progressive center movement. But again, depending on the type of Christian you're talking about, like, so for instance, if we speak to an evangelical Christian, they may say that their social justice cause is pro-life stand on abortion, or being against same-sex marriage, possibly. So like, it depends. So if you're coming from the evangelical being, you may have an idea of the things that you might think are like social causes worth fighting for, or if you're on the progressive end. So if you're thinking about LGBTQ. Rights and advocacy, if you're thinking about Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black Lives, if you're thinking about issues around poverty, income inequality, and different things like that, or more progressive issues, then your social justice leaning may lean towards those type of ideas. So a lot of times it just depends on where you situate yourself on the Christian spectrum. And then who knows, you may vacillate between progressive ideas on some things and or for lack of better words, conservative ideas on other things too. So it could be kind of fluid depending on where you fall on that spectrum.
Got you. So I guess what role does the modern black church, right? Our Pentecostal, our Baptist churches, like, what role should we be playing, or are we playing in this social justice movement?
If anything, it's about just being involved. So I think a lot of times now, I say like this, what the black churches used to be in when it comes to social justice music movements is being out front and being the lead. So knowing that for a long time, the black church was like the center of community, not just for faith, but for other, whether it's politics, whether it's education, whether it's economics and business. It was like the nucleus of community within black life. But as we progress now into this into this 21st century, we're kind of seeing the influence of the black church wane some, because in a sense it has in some areas been able to progress with the ideas over the years. And so now, like, even with this Black Lives Matter movement and moment right now, that you have it founded by three women who I know at least two of the three identify as being queer. And so, and with that, it doesn't necessarily center those staunch Christian values, but they
Yeah.
center Blackness in the heart of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but for some, they have issue with that because for some people, they say, well, I'm anti-LGBTQ, so I can't roll with Black Lives Matter because of that. And so so for some, you have like this kind of, because it doesn't necessarily align with their quote unquote Christian ideals, then they can't necessarily get on board with. It's like, I can say Black Lives Matter, but I don't say it in the way that the people that found it say it. And it's like, how can you like they found it? Like, what you mean? Like they got a whole reason when they say Black Lives Matter, what they mean by it. It's not just like some kind of cute saying. It's like, it is, in its own little way, it is a political statement because they're saying we don't need meaning in just name, but there are like policies that need to align that show that Black Lives Matter as well too. Like it needs to be more than somebody just saying that they care for my life because I'm Black. No, policy needs to be shaped in such a way that Black lives will no longer being killed by the state, where we're not being killed by poverty, where we're not being killed by homelessness, where we're not being killed by income inequality and all these different things. And so with that, but you also do have progressive Black Christians who, in a lot of respects, they're learning how to take the lead instead of trying to be the lead.
Yeah.
And so they're learning how to just play, in a lot of respects, I don't want to say play their role, but they know just where to get in, where they fit in, and be of support, more or less, than feeling like we have to be the spokesperson. We have to be the person in front. We have to be the Dr. King giving the I Have a Dream speech. Sometimes it's just being a person in the background, providing pastoral care for the person that's out on the street marching. You know, being present in a lot of respects, not even having to be the focal. I think that's something that the Black church as an institution has been so used to being the focal. Mm-hmm. And now they're in a day and age now that it's not necessarily the focus. And that's okay. Because for so long, because Black churches being the focus, like the Black churches being centered in the focus, in a lot of respects, it still marginalizes other Black voices.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking Black women, whether you're talking about Black queer voices, whether you're talking about Black children, like typically, even when we talk Black church, more often than not, without saying it, we're talking about black hetero straight male voices. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so now you're seeing that voice that's kind of like being moved to the background, and other voices are being brought out front. And it's a beautiful thing to see, because now it brings a new energy. It brings a fresh energy. Mm-hmm. It brings a needed energy too, because a lot of times those movements can be stale when it's the same people out.
Right. So with that even being said, should we not be looking for, because I know what the generation before us, one of their critiques is that we don't have an out front leader. Like there is no Martin, there is no Malcolm, right? So should we even be looking for one of them, or is it going to look like you said, someone totally different than that just hetero Black, traditional looking preacher? Or is it just that, I think I was in a different conversation where, I kind of said that black itself is the movement. So it may not be one person. It could be a cohort of us, right, who are stepping up in different spaces. So what should we be looking for, if anything at all?
And I think that's the kind of irony of it, that it's never been just one person.
Mm-hmm.
Like the name we remember is Martin. And a lot of respects, we remember the name because of how he was killed.
Right.
Like if he had to live,
true,
who knows? He may have just gotten old and did whoever else was next would just.
He could have just been like our John Lewis or our Joseph Lowry, respected individuals, but not right. Got you. Yeah.
And so the thing is, there's never just been one. It seems like there's like this tendency to try to always elevate somebody, mm-hmm. or like, I guess it would be fair to say that Martin was probably the most popular of his time, but he was definitely not the only one. And mm-hmm. even now, like there's so many people leading right now. They may not necessarily have the name recognition, but they're leading nonetheless.
Right.
And so I think even when we think about leaders, like a leader isn't somebody that's like, I guess the idea that this kind of charismatic person that we all should latch on to, like, no, just like when I think about somebody right now, Lee, I think about like Tamika Mallory, what she's doing with Until Freedom. And it's like a cohort of them. It's like mm-hmm. about a good solid 4 or 5 of them that started the organization, and they're leading. And then everybody got their role. Like I know she does a lot of the speaking, but there's other people in there that do their part. Even with Martin did a lot of speaking, but he wasn't the only one. There's a whole bunch of people that's doing their part. Like, brother, hope it's not his name, James Lawson, who spoke at John Lewis funeral. He's like the brains behind a lot of it. He's the mm-hmm. one that's educating them on the philosophy. He's doing the teaching and getting people prepared. So it's like, even though it's like we got to stop looking for a Messiah. Like, 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 like in its own little way, we each our own messiahs. Like, you just gotta like just lead within your spaces, and not only lead, but be willing to be led too. Like, I think that's another thing about leadership. You got to be willing to be led too. It's not always about trying to find somebody to do the talking for you. Sometimes you may be the one to have to do the talking.
Yeah.
Like, even from Martin, like Martin didn't go out seeking to be the leader of a movement. He got tapped. They were like, "Oh, you the new kid on the block. Don't nobody know you talk." And then from there, it kind of turned into its own thing. But it's like, we know what you can do, so we putting you here. So a lot of times, it's like leaders tend to emerge from the masses, and from that, if you lead when it's your time to lead, then if it's time for you to step back, you step back. I think something that can be problematic is that when we kind of believe our own hype as leaders.
Yeah.
And so it's like, as long as a leader, you could avoid the temptation of believing your own hype and do what you can, lead when you can. If it costs for you to fall back and let somebody else do it, fall back and let somebody else do it. But in terms of people, like this idea that we need to have this one charismatic leader that's going to take us to the promised land, like we need to let that Moses archetype go. Just understand that there are so many leaders across the board. And when we see them, we recognize them. If we trust them, we roll with them. And then if you see it in yourself, then step up and do it too.
And I think that's the biggest struggle we see specifically in the Black church, not just in terms of social justice, but in leadership in general. We're kind of groomed that, over a span of time, we're groomed to be this whatever, right? And then we step into that space, and then we hold that space oftentimes longer than we should. And never make room for what's next. And then by the time that person, like you said, could have had their voice and just stepped out, now they're in a space where they're older and they are, and their ideas are now mundane. Is never giving opportunity, right, for us to kind of have the space to lead out. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing. A lot of people aren't waiting anymore. We're not necessarily waiting for, the patriarchs and the matriarchs to kind of release us. We're kind of releasing ourselves and saying, this is what needs to happen now. And I feel like I can play a part, even if I'm never famous, and even if I never reach, the pinnacle that Martin and all those other people reached, I feel like I can still do my part. And I think that's super important to our community, because so many times we lean on faith leaders, but those faith leaders don't always pour back into us in a way that empowers us socially and from an equitable and justice standpoint. So how is it that people in the Christian faith can be so committed to their faith, but still be like this like how can we find faith and hope while still being disenfranchised?
Survival.
Yeah.
One word.
Yeah, it's been our thing.
Yeah. It's strictly survival. Like, because it's like the world has beaten you down so much, like you have to depend on something otherworldly to overcome the hell that you living in on a daily basis. Like, and so that's like Black spirituality has carried us a long way. Whether it's like traditionally, I guess for a lot of people, it's been Christianity, but we can also talk about Islam and how it came. I mean, because you had a lot of people who were Muslims when they came over on those ships as well too. The whether it's voodoo or different, but what people like to demonize voodoo, but then it's Black spirituality, and so like those things that have been able to sustain us in a lot of respects. But when you talk about survival and being able to sustain you when there's really a lot of hopelessness around you. And so that's something that when we talk about just being able to survive as people, that's why we lean in on our faith, because like there's something about believing in this guy who at the end of the day still has control. Because like I think that's a theme that's been common, that's been carried from generation to generation. And then the thing tied with that too, when we talk about our faith, it's not just this individual faith, but it's a faith that's tied to community as well too.
Yeah.
And so like to know that it's not just simply my belief of my own, but it's as a body and community of believers. This is something that we believe together, and this hope that we have together as community. And I think that's something that in a lot of respects, the oppressor has always feared about. They've always feared this. They've always feared communal gatherings of Black.
Yeah.
So from the period of slavery where, whether we don't need y'all gathering outside of the fields, we don't need you gathering, don't gather in your own hush harbors and those things like that, because we don't need you all plotting against us. That's a lot of reason why they fear those gatherings, because we feel like they could be plotting slaves, or they could be plotting rebellions and insurrections and different things like that, especially when those things came to pass. When you think about MRVC, Nat Turner, and others,
right?
Like, or you plotting and trying to escape for freedom. It's like we need to have them separate. We like, and even now, like the fear of just seeing group of young black men gather together and thinking that they might be doing something wrong, where it's like it's something about gathering of black people in space together that strikes fear in people, because in a lot of respects they know what that power can be when we come together and say, like, okay, we're serious about coming together and fighting for liberation and fighting for freedom. Even the protests and marches now, that's what it is. It's like we can't see too many black people and black faces gather together, because if they do, their ultimate fear is that we want to destroy them. That's the ultimate. Where a lot of it is like, nah, we really just want to gather to be free. Ain't really trying to. We don't really want revenge. We want revenge.
So has the black church actually played into that some? Like how would you say they've kind of not empowered us? I don't want to say failed us, but not empowered us more.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say the black church has failed, because in a lot of respects, like when you think about that invisible institution that was created during slavery, like that's like the origins of that black church space. And those were the ones coming together were plotting for freedom and plotting for liberation and saying, this is how we get north. This is how we come together and we finna plot this rebellion to get us free. And so there's that history of the black church just being able of pointing us, or the history of the black church pointing us in that direction of freedom. Now, is the church perfect? By no means, no.
Yeah.
Because in that process of it, we've had our own demons that we still continually deal with. So whether you're talking about patriarchy, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, what else? Profiteering, different things like that. Like we definitely have, like on one hand, you have this institution that we felt like was our own, and at the same time trying to keep hold of that power, you would still end up mimicking the things of those persons who oppressed you.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it hasn't failed us, but we do have our demons and stuff that can and has held us back in a lot of areas, especially when talking about in terms of like the more progressive ideas that are taking place right now. And a lot of times you're seeing like now a lot of younger black Christians, not as much compared to younger white Christians. Like there's still more younger black Christians in church, but you're also seeing this move away from like feeling like we have to be confined to this traditional church space, and even exploring ideas outside of our traditional Christian ideas and orthodoxy. So embracing more like ancestral veneration, like this communion just with the ancestors, this idea of having a deep spirituality, of tapping into other faith traditions and seeing how all these things come together. And so you are kind of seeing that happen as well too. In light of what's taking place, and kind of like this you do kind of have this small discontent. I'm not going to quantify, but you have a discontent that does take that has happened with our relationship with the traditional black church.
So how do we build upon, I guess, this growth and this new game perspective and continue to make the black church go forward?
I think COVID-19 doing that for us.
Yeah.
Like COVID-19 forced a lot of hands. Want to definitely pay respects to all families who've been affected by it in the most negative way, who lost family members and things like that. And then, but seeing how churches have had to rethink how they engage with their members and how they engage with their congregations. And now, like, for a long time, people were just anti-technology, and now you better get with it or get left behind.
Yeah, it's definitely forcing some hands.
It's forcing some hands. And so if you don't want to get left behind, because I think that's the thing about, you have to recognize the sign of the times. You have to be, I think this is the part, and I think this is where like the theological conversations come into play, because now it begins like, how do you understand God? Do you think God to be stagnant, or do you see like this God is ever changing, ever moving, and ever flowing? And are you in tune with what God is doing right now versus what God is doing? So it's like that. So there's some other theological questions that pastors and ministers and others have to really start to consider when wanting to engage people and engage people in their faith.
And I think that's one of the most interesting parts about it, because it's been forever said that the church has always been a step behind. And like you said, COVID is forcing us to catch up. right? And kind of almost rapidly, and we're stumbling over ourselves because we didn't have some churches didn't have none of these things in places. And you're right, it's making us ask the question, is God confined to our Sunday morning, to our, 2 hour schedule, 3-4 hour schedule, depending on the black church, right? To our, traditional ways of worship. Because I went back home maybe about 3 weeks ago, right? To visit, and my home church opened back up with their social distancing rules and all those kind of things. It's a small church, so they can social distance with no problem. But I will say my pastor was a stickler for a minimum 2 hours. Like, service could be over, he was going to stretch that thing to 2 hours, and that was just his traditional mindset. But now he's in a space where he's limited the service time to about an hour 15, hour and a half. And when I was there, we had a deep, rich spiritual experience in about an hour and 15 minutes, and we were done. So now it begs the question, whenever things come back to normal, right? Do you put God back in this box, or do you continue to flow and adjust, right? Do you continue to flow and be as creative and ever changing and ever evolving as the God that you say that you serve?
Absolutely. I would even bear the question: do you even go back to the building? Like,
that's an
depending on the context and the congregation, because it's like now. Because I've thought about this in the past. Like, what would it mean to gather virtually for certain things? But then when you do come together, you actually come together to do the actual work. Like.
And it makes the community space that much more sacred, right? If we think about it that way too.
Yeah, and then even you could begin to retrofit like your actual building for what you. Because usually when we talk about prior to COVID, more often than not, people using their sanctuaries no more than maybe twice a week. So for 5 of the days out the week, they're just sitting there, not being used. It's not functional. So, excuse me. So now we begin to question like how do we make our sacred spaces functional and functional for the work and the service of what our faith calls us to do? Because if our sanctuaries are just strictly for Sunday morning come together, again, worship is important, but worship is not the end all be all. Like, right. Our worship should be tied really more so. Our worship, if anything, should be intimately connected with the work that we're doing on the daily outside the walls.
Yeah, that's
and so I think the thing is now it's like when we come together as the church, like especially because I think now I'm pretty sure a bunch of people saying like now this is the moment where we can see the church is not the building but the church is so really what does that really mean if the moment ever comes back where you can go back into your buildings? So now will we just go back to the old models where the church is the building now. The church ain't the people no more. We back in our building. We back home. We finna run up and down the aisles and shout because the Lord has set us free. Like, so I think now it's like just some deep wrestling theologically that has to take place within our church spaces. And it's healthy too. Because there's a lot of people out here suffering right now. It's a lot of people like that's going through it. Like,
yeah.
Like this economy is shot right now. People are without jobs. Still people homeless and different things like that. And it's like the question becomes what is our purpose as church? Because again, the church wasn't created for the church's sake. The church was created to serve. And so the question becomes if we are part of this body, what does our service look like in this time period and beyond?
No, that's good. That's really good. And I think one of the other parts in reconsidering that as well is, also thinking about, programmatically, how do we begin to, make our churches fit, right? Because like you said, most of the times it's a Sunday morning experience. It's a Wednesday night Bible study experience. And, so programmatically, do we take the children beyond the standard VBS and what are we actually doing to serve our youth, to serve our elders, to and I'm not saying go broke, right, to giving out all of your funds, but what I am saying is, though, to your point, being that space that's outside of the building and actually being the church to serve the people that you say represents, the ecclesia, right? So I definitely think those are really dope and dope conversation and necessary. That's what I'm looking for. Necessary conversations that we should be having as we go forward. Right. So we talked about how we can keep the Black church accountable, but in what ways can we hold our white brothers and sisters accountable as Christians?
All right. So Maybe look, I had to write something down for that question.
Okay.
It's like, cause and it's so funny too, because it's a short answer, but I'm gonna talk a little bit more though too, because I got a couple different feelings about it.
Okay.
So the answer I wrote down was like, either when you see something or hear something, you say something. Like,
that should be the simple, easy answer.
Like you just can't let them off the hook. Some things you just can't let off the hook.
Right.
And I think a lot of it too, if you're in those spaces. Like for me, personally, I haven't been in those spaces. My church experiences and most have been around Black folk.
Yeah, ditto.
I ain't been around too many white Christians. And so like I'm not the spokesperson or the expert on that.
Okay.
And so the other side of that too is like sometimes some stuff they just gonna have to learn through life. Because I know there comes a point in time where you can't tell me that you don't see this. Like some of this stuff you just like you're not that oblivious. Especially if you got Black people in your church. If you go to like a quote unquote multiracial church. If you go to a multiracial church, I'm not gonna even call it multicultural. You go to a multiracial church. Because more often than not, the culture of the church is gonna more often than not reflect the culture of the leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
And if the leadership is not like multicultural, like you say, when you go to a Black church, you going to a Black church.
You're going to a Black church, and you know it's a Black church.
And you know it's like when white people go to a Black church, like trust me, anytime any white member that ever went to LBDs or anything like that, they didn't come in asking for things to change. They knew where they were coming. They were coming to a Black church. Straight up.
Yeah.
And so we never, so it's like we don't never labeled ourselves as being a multicultural, multiracial. Now we're a Black church, and again, we open to everybody. You can come if you want to, but just know what you're coming into.
Right.
It's like stepping into a Trinity with Jeremiah Wright as pastor, and you expecting him to not be Black as I don't know what. No. Now, if you're a church and you label yourself multicultural, but your church doesn't reflect like if y'all not running different languages, if y'all not expressing different, and I think that's the part too where like people just put a whole bunch of flags in a sanctuary and say they multicultural. No, you're not multicultural. You're multiracial. You might be multi-ethnic, but you sure enough ain't multicultural. And so it's so I think if anything, in talking with my white brothers and sisters, it will be like if you're going to say that you're going to be this reflection of the kingdom of God, if you're going to be this multiracial, multicultural church, then you have to be very intentional about reflecting those in all parts of your church life. And not only within your church life, but then also seeing how the things outside of the church on a daily basis, whether if you have persons who are immigrants and dealing with ICE raids and stuff like that, what are you gonna say? How are you gonna deal with that? Yeah. When you're dealing with members who are getting killed by police officers, but you ain't said a word. How we dealing with that? Like, and so you can't have people within your churches who are not the majority in America, but not discuss the issues that affect them on a daily basis. So I guess my big critique would even be with those kind of multiracial, multicultural churches and like really having them dig in even more they already have. Now, and then for some, you just gotta let it just is what it is. Like some folks understand. Yeah. Like, you gotta one like I think matter of fact, I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today and was talking about choosing your confrontation wisely. Like it's not the fact like confrontation is unavoidable, like, but it's like being wise about the confrontations that you choose to
and how you engage in them, yeah,
and how you engage in them, like because it's like if it's like I don't want to just engage in confrontation for confrontation's sake, but it needs to like point towards something that's like that points towards the end that's gonna help us move forward. Right. And so I think if anything, if that's the kind of engagement that's gonna take place, that is gonna move towards the end that's gonna help move forward, then I'm all for it. But I ain't finna be sitting like I ain't finna sit up here and argue for the sake of arguing. It's too many people out here dying and suffering for us to argue just for argue, just to try to see who right. I ain't about here trying to prove whether I'm right or wrong. Or have you prove you right or wrong.
Right. Right. And I think for me, one of the biggest questions for not even for our the white leaders in the Christian space is more so when I think about engaging confrontation, I'm almost thinking about if I sit under a white pastor, at what point do I hold him accountable to, like you said, seeing me, beyond a tithe and offering, a member, but as, a black human being, and miss me with that. I don't see colors, peace and all that different kind of stuff, right? Because if you don't see color, you don't see me. So I guess I guess, and I don't know because I haven't asked the question. I know I can't ask you because you don't sit under a white pastor.
But I would say I have a friend of mine who actually he serves at a church under a white pastor. And he talked about he spoke with me about like having to come right to him and tell him exactly what the situation was. Like, yo, we need to talk about this and we need to deal with it. And they were open and receptive to it.
Okay.
And the same thing with another friend as well too. Like, it was almost for him. He was like he needed to tell him like, yo, give me a second before we dive into it, because I gotta like get my mind and my headspace right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know for him it's like, just being black in America, this stuff is frustrating.
Right, absolutely.
And it's like, and it's not a simple and easy fix. And it's like, there's no point in talking if you're not gonna really seriously engage it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's one of those things where it's like everybody was like giving like the kind of PR statements from their companies and everything, and everybody was like Black Lives Matter out like in the first few months after Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and everything.
Yeah.
And then over time, it kind of, we kind of seeing it. It's kind of waning a little bit. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily from our community, but from other communities, it's starting to wane.
Right.
And I think that's the part about it where it's like, if we're gonna talk about this, if we're gonna deal with this, we need to like have serious engagement for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, because again, this is not an isolated incident. This is in a long line of incidents that have happened for hundreds of years. Like, this ain't new.
This is what we deal with in life. Like, just period.
Right. And it kind of points back to what the question earlier about, and for us to even still be here and be halfway sane in a lot of respects is because we've had to grab hold of something, whether it's faith, whether, and more put like this, however you frame your spirituality, whatever that thing, whether you got to sage it up, whether you got to crystal it up, whether you got to guide it up, whether you got to Allah it up, whether you got to Zen, however you got to get yourself together. We've figured out a bunch of different ways to keep ourselves together in the midst of all this trauma, hundreds of years of it.
Absolutely, man.
And they got to take that trauma serious.
They do. And one of the things, just even think about it in a corporate space, because I got laid off during the pandemic. And even in my job search, I've seen everybody is hiring a vice president or a director of global and, it's diversity and inclusion. And it's like, first of all, where were all these spaces pre any of this? Like, your HR department should have been equipped with that kind of stuff anyway. But I think it begs the question, to kind of further this conversation a little bit, after you fill these roles and now that things are, allegedly waning down outside, from national attention, what do you do with these positions? Is there any long-term conversations or action plans in place or strategic thrust that's going to continue to push it forward? Because you didn't hire a buttload of people qualified to do this type of work. But then now that it's not national news anymore, or that you took George Floyd as a moment and not a movement, right? Then what do you do? And I think it's the same thing, going back to holding our white Christian leaders accountable, because one of the conversations that we don't have, especially those who are a little bit more charismatic, is that you gained your popularity, a lot of stuff on our black stages and profiting off of our black dollars and our black souls, right? So if that is how you made it to where you are, then at some point this conversation has to be more than a conversation. Like, I don't necessarily expect you to be Warnock or some of the others, right? Otis Moss or things like that. But what I do expect, right, is a level of actual leadership and empathy. I think we've heard that all during the DNC, that is real, right? And not just for any political gain or just to save face and to keep your black vote, but to for real help push the agenda and to be more than an ally, but an accomplice in this movement, that is not just Black Lives Matter for the moment, but Black Lives Matter as a movement and something that's continued. Because I don't think that we're ever going to be in a space, right, where we have to stop. I think there's going to always be some form of resistance that's going to cause us to fight and to keep pushing and to keep progressing. That's just where my mind is.
No, I feel you. I mean, I think that's the thing about because Black Lives Matter been around for a strong 7 years.
Yeah.
I think people and I think a lot of times that's a long time. And knowing that that's a part of this long kind of string of liberation movements that Black people have been a part of for hundreds of years. It's kind of, even when I think about when I think about the Emancipation Proclamation and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Like, no, Abraham and Lincoln ain't free nobody. It's those persons who fought 200 years before that saying we want to be free that freed them. Not a stroke of a pen from Congress or anything like that. Like it's persons who put blood, sweat, and tears into it. And so even in this movement right now, it's going to be the sweat equity of people who will probably not even have, many of them won't have their names remembered, but the policies and things that, God willing, that will come of this will be because of the sweat equity that others have put in. And like you said, we need more accomplices to be a part of this, because there has been a lot of these movements have happened because of strong alliances across racial lines, across class lines, across gender lines, across across so many different lines. But it's about people want to just put more on the line for it and taking it serious.
Yeah, big facts. So as we get ready to round out the conversation, bro, this has been really good. But just like, I guess, give some parting words for people to like remain really authentic to their Blackness, and however that looks, right? Because Black people are not monolithic. That's one thing that I like stand on. But like remain true to their Blackness and still have a deep commitment to their faith.
Something I would say is like don't create this hierarchy between your racial identity and your faith identity. Like they don't have to compete with each other.
Yeah. So
I've seen people make posts like, I'm Christian before I'm Black, and I'm like, all right, that's cool. But like you don't have to be this before that. Like you could, I could be both and I'm Christian and I'm Black. Like it don't have to be an either or. Like you could be a lot, because we all have multiple identities, and I'll say it like this. Ideally, we shouldn't have to feel like we have to lay one down or pick one up, but we should be able to live in the fullness of all of those things. And so I think we should even try to make it a practice of living authentically in all of our identities, and not allow, I'm trying to find the word I want to use, and not allowing the proclivities of others make us feel like we have to shrink ourselves for them. And so,
yeah, that's good.
Live in the fullness of yourself, because that will push and encourage others to live in the fullness of themselves, to really live freely in all of that. And then, and whatever that thing is for you, and then continue to hone that, grow that, shape that, and mold that as you see fit. And I think that's what I would say. Living all of it. Don't put a hierarchy on it.
That's beautiful, man. So as we close out this conversation, one thing that we are super, super passionate about on this podcast is self-care. And we always talk about, what you're doing for self-care this weekend, particularly for us brothers, because a lot of us don't engage in self-care in the ways that we need to. So I'm going to ask you, man, what are you doing this weekend for Mike? What are you doing for self-care?
Man, I'm going to watch basketball.
All right.
I'm finna watch some of these playoff games. I'm finishing up. I started reading Song of Solomon again. I'm gonna try to finish that up this weekend. I got my shows on Sunday that's coming on. I'm watching P Valley on Sunday.
Bruh.
That's my joint.
P Valley, my
joint.
That thing is good, bro.
I want to watch that other show, I think it's Lovecraft Country on HBO too. I'm trying to check that. I know it started first episode came out last week, so I'm trying to catch up on that and watch that on Sunday too. Like I just, I'm gonna watch my TV and I'm gonna read my books.
That's what's up. And actually, probably a very similar theme for me in terms of self-care this weekend too. I've discovered P Valley maybe 2 weeks ago, and I'm caught all the way up. And P Valley is not for the faint at heart, but it is a great piece.
No, it's a great show.
It's a great show. It is a great show. And down there in Chuckalissa, Mississippi.
Man, I wanted to start trying to figure out if Chuckalissa was on the map. That ain't no Tupelo. Not Tupelo, Tunica. That's what I meant. Tunica, not Tupelo. It's Tunica. Ain't no Tunica.
Right. Now they are the Chuckalissa Mounds that are in Memphis, Tennessee. I remember going to those things for field trips for real as a kid. But Chuckalissa, because when they talk about the mounds, I'm like, wait a minute. Them mounds are in Memphis. Them mounds ain't in Mississippi. But I see the regional connection they made. But that's what's up, bro. Thanks so much for coming and sitting down with me and having the conversation. It's been super dope. We got to have you back to chop it up some more about some more stuff.
Oh, no, I definitely appreciate you for having me on, man. Appreciate you, man. Keep doing your thing. You know, I support the podcast. One love for it. You know, I got it on all my platforms.
I appreciate it. All right, we're going to wrap up this segment. We're going to close out the show. And the last thing we like to call the benediction. Let's do it.
All right.
You couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. You could never ever bring me down. Couldn't do it then, couldn't do it now. You could take my
Man, that conversation was absolutely phenomenal. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I want to first shout out my boy Michael Wortham for coming into the living room and having this amazing conversation on this finale of our mini series called Sunday School. So a wonderful way to close it out, a great way to end it, really focusing in on our blackness and our faith and the intersectionality of race and our belief systems and how we can live and exist fully in both of them. I think so many times, specifically us in the Christian church, and we talked about it, are sometimes conflicted, right, with whether we should support Black Lives Matter or this, and the third, and whether we should be conservative or more liberal because of our Democratic or Republican beliefs and all these type of things. But I don't think we have to lay down our blackness. I think we can still advocate. No, I don't think. I know that we can still advocate for the full rights of all of humanity, specifically those of Black people, right? We can advocate for justice and equity for all Black people, and we can still be, while doing that advocacy, still be 100% committed to our faith and rooted in what we believe in, and rightly dividing the word of God and all those good things, right, that we say that we do as Christians. I believe that there is duality and that we can do both. We do not have to choose one over the other. And I'm so glad that this conversation brought light and kind of gave us a blueprint in the ways in which we can be able to do that, right? So I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Hope that you've enjoyed this Sunday school series. Let's pray, and we're going to get out of here and give you back your Sunday. God, we love you, we bless you, and we thank you for this another Sunday. We thank you for this series entitled Sunday School. We thank you for all of the amazing conversations that has taken place over the mic, and I thank you for each and every person that has had the privilege to contribute to these conversations. Bless them 100-fold. Continue to do amazing things in their lives. And we thank you for the insight, the revelation, the inspiration that you have given us during this time together. And each person who is listening, God, bless them, give them peace, give them joy as we navigate this ridiculously crazy terrain during this pandemic, and we try to find and rest and settle in pockets of joy. God, we understand that you are the creator of all things. We love you, we bless you, and we give you glory on this particular Sunday. Again, thank you for Sunday School. Thank you for this mini-series. Thank you for what you have done and you have charged us to do, and thank you for the lives that have been impacted, and even my life that's been impacted by these amazing conversations, by these brilliant individuals that you've placed here on earth. God, we love you and we give you glory. It is in Jesus' name. God, thank you for our blackness. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for our blackness. As we said on the podcast, it is always a great day to be Black. And we thank you for the ability to 100% believe, trust, praise, worship you, and to be 100% committed and proud of our blackness. We give you glory. We give you honor. We give you praise in that. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right, y'all. Amazing, amazing series this has been. Thank you for sticking it out with me. As always, I will see you Thursday for our regular scheduled podcast. Thank you for welcoming our brother Brian here officially as a co-host to the living room. Be sure to reach out to us in the many different ways that you're able to, on Instagram, via email, all of that good stuff. I love y'all. I love y'all. I love y'all. See you soon. Remember, do not let life stress you out, especially on this Sunday, but do what you can while you can, but don't you ever get caught with your work undone. I love y'all. Happy Sunday.